Hello and welcome everybody to the Ryerson University Ted Rogers School of Management International Sports Business Spotlight. We're going to continue our series with top leaders in the sports industry, focusing on future trends and hearing some great stories and lessons in leadership along the way. My name is Chris Schufelt, Vice President of Business Operations at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And today I am joined by a former colleague, Alyson Walker, who is currently the Chief Commercial Officer at Overactive Media. Hello and welcome, Alyson.
Good morning, Chris. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. So when we were going through our executives that we wanted to talk to in this podcast, one thing I wanted to make sure is that we were talking to people that were involved deeply in innovation in the sports industry, and that people had been leaders for a number of years. So you immediately came to mind, and excited to talk because over the last week, Overactive Media has made quite a bit of noise. So we're excited to hear a lot about that.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Good stuff. So first, I want to set the table. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio and provide the students and everybody listening the opportunity to understand a little bit about who Alyson Walker is and some of the past experiences. So I'll read a little bit from your bio and we'll go from there. So Alyson Walker is the Chief Commercial Officer at Overactive Media, a global esports company focused on building winning franchises and creating unrivaled fan experiences. Alyson is responsible for driving business and audience growth through global partnerships, marketing, content, PR and events, as well as managing the corporate services functions at Overactive Media, including finance, HR, IT, facilities, and management. Alyson has extensive experience in the sports and entertainment industries with a proven track record of success as demonstrated in her previous roles, where she served as the VP of Brand Partnerships and Client Strategy at Bell Media, VP of Network and Broadcast at MLSE, and time spent both at the Canadian Olympic Committee as well as the Canada Olympic Broadcast Consortium for the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics. Alyson holds an MBA from Rotman School of Management from the University of Toronto and is a proud WISE Toronto board member, which is Women in Sports and Events. She's an advisor here at Ryerson University for the Sports Business MBA and is a passionate mentor in a number of other organizations here in Toronto. So Alyson, you're a busy person. You've got lots going on. True.
I love it all. It's great.
Good stuff. So listen, the last, I can't believe it, we're almost at 12 months during this global pandemic. And we've all been battling and trying to figure out how we're going to get our sports teams and our teams playing safely, and we're managing through our teams as leaders and making sure as organizations we're doing the best we can with our people. So I'd just love for you to quickly reflect on those past 12 months, specifically as it reflects on leadership and what yourself and the other leaders at Overactive Media had focused in on as top priorities in your organization.
Absolutely. Well, I do remember that day fondly because it was leading into March break and my son's birthday. That was probably the most devastating byproduct, is having to cancel a birthday party at a trampoline park. I can tell you we didn't anticipate it would be this long, but I don't think anybody did. So that was the first thing I can say in hindsight. We're a 2.5-year-old company, and so all organizations dealt with this very differently, but we were almost forced to make very quick decisions so that we could set ourselves up for long-term sustainability. And what that meant, where many of my colleagues and peers in the industry sort of held and wanted to wait and see, we had to move fast. And so unfortunately that meant looking at our books, looking at our cash, frankly, to figure out how do we sustain ourselves well into 2021 at the very least, with plans to grow beyond that. So we had to assume revenues wouldn't grow, although I'll come back to that. They did, thank goodness. But with that, we had to, of course, reduce our operational expense, which meant, unfortunately, saying goodbye to some of our great colleagues who'd been growing the company with us, and quite significantly reducing our actual operational expenses and capital outflow. So all of those things set us up for complete reforecast. We tightened everything up, and then we moved forward. And I can tell you that at the end of the year, the other thing that we had to do was ask our employees to take a pay reduction. The good news is in December, we were able to reconstitute, well, in October, we reconstituted full pay. In December, we made whole on everybody back to April, which was a very satisfying thing to be able to do. Not necessarily expected, but I feel very confident about where we are today, looking forward. The other thing I'll just say is we then had to rally together just from a business strategy standpoint and figure out what we were going to focus on. Lucky for us, as you would know, and I would assume students would know, our teams were able to keep playing online. I'll come back to our business thesis, but the leagues that we are in are really about getting together and playing together in front of fans. That is almost the reverse reality where we start with a digitally native industry and we are trying to bring people together live. So luckily we still had teams playing, therefore we had brands we could continue to build. We had assets, albeit different assets, a lot related to digital content and broadcast assets for our partners. And so we had to pivot our plans, as everybody did. And that's what we did. And we found great success in many of the initiatives that we sort of moved forward with in 2020. So it's a good news story. There's still a lot of work to do, but today I can tell you, looking back, we made very fast and very hard decisions, and it served us well.
That's good. I mean, there's no playbook. There's no written rules of
No.
how to lead through the pandemic. So coming together as a leadership team, and I remember the days for us as well, sitting down as that leadership team, and we were actually on the ground at BMO Field, and we had to make some very quick decisions as to, are we playing that are we practicing that morning? How are we dealing with staff? What are our other teams doing? Well, we can't cancel practice before the Leafs cancel practice.
Right.
As you can imagine, within our organization, there was all these things happening very, very quickly that morning after the NBA shutdown, which kind of triggered everything on March 12th. So yeah, those are moments in time none of us are ever going to soon forget. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Quick action and make sure leadership is communicating has been paramount. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So would you actually say that during the pandemic, esports as an industry has had the opportunity to grow and thrive? Or you talk about this kind of reverse model where you're now trying to put people in venues. I'm just curious to hear your overall perspective. Have you guys gone forward or backwards or remain neutral during the pandemic?
It's a great question. And typically we're going to need the research groups to do the research at the end of the year. What we have is early 2020 research in terms of viewership and audiences. But anecdotally, what I will tell you is that a couple of things happened that were very positive for us. First, everybody, of course, was at home and was on digital platforms. And so engagement with gaming and viewership with esports, of course, rose. There's no question there was very little else to engage with and to watch. And so that was a very strong byproduct. The other thing as a result of that is people, when I say people, I really mean the markets, the business leaders started to talk and hear more about esports. So it started to normalize. It will come as no surprise when I started in August of 2019, many of my peers, like you and I, and our peers of our age and generation, looked at me and said the words, I don't really get it. And I found that always to be interesting. And I would then respectfully say, stop saying that because it makes you sound old and out of it. It isn't the model, which let's talk about today is very similar to what you do, Cheri, at MLSE. We are building teams, we're building brands, we're monetizing those. We're in the content business, we're in the venue business, et cetera. So it isn't hard to get. But what did happen was people started to talk about engaging with professional esports players and teams, and that was extremely helpful for us. In terms of your question about moving forward, moving back, we absolutely moved the needle forward. Interestingly enough, all of the partners in our discussions, we're out talking to all of the brand partners in this country, as you can imagine. They remained interested. Of course, budgets, there were discussions about budgets, but the interest not only remained, they started coming back to this reality that that young people are very valuable, I would say Gen Z and millennial audiences, and that it's very clear that that's who they want to be engaging with and capturing. And so there's an opportunity here, and things got normalized so that when I'm sitting in a VP of marketing or chief marketing chair, it starts to make sense to my boss when I bring forth an esports solution. And so all of that time, we talk a lot about being ahead of the industry. And I really believe that our team is ahead of the industry and we need it to keep catching up to us. And so I think that time helped us in many ways. Of course, we needed to shift the assets and the value that we're delivering to our partners. Not entirely, because everything that we did, we would have done anyways, except that match play was online and our players were here, not in other countries and cities. So lots of changes to our business model, but we absolutely grew and evolved, and the industry came along with us.
That's amazing. You know, this topic fascinates me for a number of reasons, and I might jump a little bit here because
no problem.
I'm just drawing on a lot of reflections from my kids and how they consume online, whether it's esports or whether it's certain YouTubers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a massive opportunity for you, and it's a conversion opportunity in my mind, right? There's so many kids, Gen Zs, that are watching professional YouTubers play games, and maybe they're not necessarily watching them playing the games of the titles that you guys own teams within, but it's in the same space, and there's that same connection. And you know, my kids haven't necessarily made that jump. Now Evan's starting to watch Twitch, and he's starting to watch some you know, a little more professional gamers on Twitch, but it's really a lot of YouTube. So how do you guys try to attract, and you're in control and head of marketing as well for Overactive? What's that conversion process like? Because there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. You've touched on a number of things that I'll talk about. Just last night, I was up late. We have a live events team that is a live and called virtual online events team. We put on a production and broadcast for one of our peers. The Houston Outlaws are an Overwatch team, obviously in Houston. The whole event, it was about 3 hours long, was about attracting and picking the next content creator for the Houston Outlaws. And this was 3 hours long. It is exactly the world you're talking about. Some of them were competitive in some way in the Overwatch world, but really it's about content creation. It's about becoming celebrity. It's about representing these organizations, no different than some of the work that you would do for your teams at Maple Leaf Sports. So I share that because it's exactly the realm of what you're talking about, the content creation piece, separate from the actual match play. So 2 things to answer. So we talk about Twitch a lot. Twitch, of course, was the first platform to really own esports, so competitive play and casual gaming, no question. Mixer came along. They haven't, that Microsoft owns, they haven't grown to, I think, where they wanted to, and Microsoft has shifted their priorities there. However, YouTube is still the largest streaming platform in the world by far. And what's very interesting in terms of taking advantage of these platforms is Activision Blizzard. This is going to go a little bit more into our core and what we do. Activision Blizzard is a publisher. That's what we call them, a publicly traded company. They are a publisher of games, 2 of which are Call of Duty and Overwatch. They were the first company to come up with the insight that they own the game. They own all of the rights, the IP rights, and the right to monetize. And therefore, they wanted to create a league and own the league, as opposed to have what we call TOs, tournament organizers across the world, licensing the game and frankly monetizing and getting to run events how they wanted. And so we're in that world. We're in the franchise esports league and game ecosystem. And with that, there's a business model I'd love to share that's very interesting. We, in an unprecedented move at the start of last year, they did a global deal with YouTube, over $140 million deal with YouTube, because YouTube gaming is certainly a large going concern, very competitive to Twitch. And so while I was watching an event last night on Twitch that my team helped organize, it wasn't for our own brands. We're very invested in North America in building out YouTube and YouTube gaming. And that's where we have team channels on YouTube. And so I'll come back to your question about conversion. In Europe, we have teams in 2 different leagues that are mostly broadcast on Twitch. And so it's very interesting for us to grow that. We still have YouTube channels, of course, because in our minds, the greatest potential lies where the greatest reach is, and that is certainly YouTube. Not to undermine Twitch, it's an extremely important platform to gamers and to esports. And interesting, if you follow Twitch, their focus is on diversifying their portfolio as well. So they're trying to get into the music world, into sports, and into lifestyle and celebrity beyond just gaming, of course. Back to conversion, you're absolutely right. I mean, what's very interesting for our teams. So in Toronto, we have an Overwatch team called Toronto Defiant, and we have a Call of Duty team called Toronto Ultra. Those teams have core audiences. This goes back to the business model. Just like all of the traditional sport leagues that you are in, Chris, the NBA, the NHL, the league created a franchise model that is a closed ecosystem. The best in the world can only play in that ecosystem. If you are the best at Call of Duty, you need to be playing on one of the 12 teams. That's a scarce resource. We have 5 players on our team, 4 play. It's a 4-on-4 game. Last year it was 5-on-5. So that's not very many people if you do the math on how many of the best people become actual pros. And so what we've created is a regional model where we've taken Call of Duty fans in Canada. We're the only professional team in Canada. And we try and rally them around Toronto Ultra like you do Toronto Raptors, the only NBA team in this country. And so we have core fans, and our core fans are certainly our bread and butter, and we engage our core fans on a daily basis, no question. Beyond that, we have casual fans, and that's for us the beginning of when we talk about conversion is around, we've got lots of people who are very interested casually in gaming, esports as an extension. It's a bit more, it's competitive, people win. And so the conversion for us is let's get those folks in. The larger ecosystem, we absolutely play into our Toronto Ultra brand for a Call of Duty team is very intentionally irreverent lifestyle. We're doing collabs on a daily basis. We just did a really cool shoe deal with Mac House. We work with Peace Collective on some of our merch. We work with our partners at Universal Music on musicians and bringing them into the fold. Our top player on our Ultra team on Call of Duty is best friends with Mitch Marner, which brought Mitch into the fold. We like to call it mashup culture. We're bringing everything together. So for us, conversion is less of a generational because we start in a place where we speak to a young generation, and more about bringing the masses into esports because it really is the culmination of so many things. It's competitive play, yes, but it's a community. It's where people have like-minded interests, where we can certainly engage them in everything that we're doing with our teams and with our partners. So to me, that's actually the more critical conversion. But the points you make are very accurate. Youth, 18 to 34-year-olds are consuming content, building community, creating their identity online today. And that's where we need to be. There's no question.
I remember going down to a Leaders in Sport conference, may have been 4 or 5 years ago now, down in New York, and there was numerous panels on esports. And I think at the time, Overactive Media wasn't a company as of yet, and esports, we were starting to get into the esports world. So we're trying to figure out how this is going to play out. And I remember hearing from the guy who's the commissioner of the Overwatch League, and he was sitting on one of these panels. But the talk about creating fandom is precisely the same as what we talk about, creating an emotional connection with the consumer between the team brand or the athletes and getting them to fall in love. And
absolutely,
that's the same. And at the time, I think 4, 5, 6 years ago, there was a lot of people sitting around saying, well, how do you fall in love with somebody who's playing, in that digital arena? Well, it's the same. It's that form is the same, whether you're watching on TV or you're watching something on the computer, or people are in love with arts, culture, all these different things. So why not
exactly
esports?
It's an interesting insight. And back to my point about our peers, we have to get out of the mind of me, Alyson Walker, trying to understand the consumption habits of people that are younger than we have technology that has evolved so quickly that didn't necessarily exist when I was that same age. So things have changed. And with that, consumption and community building have changed. And so people do create these communities. That's why they want to get together. That's why our live events will be successful, because people want to come together with the folks that they talk to online and that they resonate with, frankly. And this is an area that is I mean, the numbers don't lie. The viewership and the engagement numbers are astronomical. There is scale here, which is why this model can and will work, I believe.
You called me maybe a few months into your job, and we talked about supporter culture. And you were I think you were approached by a fan who wanted to create a supporters group, and we had a very traditional sports-like or soccer-like conversation around supporter culture in global football. And how has that progressed? Is there supporters groups now for your teams? And I'm curious to hear how that evolved.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, one of the things that's interesting too is that, and it really isn't different. Let's take TFC because we both love the team and the games and attending and the supporters. Because this is it's not a nascent industry, but it's certainly an evolving model, because lots of people have been gaming since the dawn of time. Esports has come along, but there has been competitive esports for well over 10 years. This model, though, where we're creating regional ownership around teams, is new. And so take Overwatch as the example. It was the first franchise league. Activision Blizzard, the Overwatch game, we have Toronto Defiant. This is a group of people that were already fans of Overwatch. They didn't have a team that was local for them to cheer for, so they chose their favorite personalities or favorite players. There were teams, and in Call of Duty the same, but they weren't regionally based. So now you come along and you create a regionally based team. And I remember because the first Overwatch watch party was at Real Sports. And so you bring everybody together, and you have to be very careful and sensitive about deciding that you own those fans, because that fan group already existed and already communicated on Discord, on social. They were already communicating. And so we wanted to make sure we're very respectful to the leaders of those groups. When we came along and said, okay, now we are Toronto Defiant, now we want to collectively bring the groups together. And so after our conversation, that's what we did. We respectfully worked with the leaders of each of those groups of fans to bring together a collective of fans. And the greatest insight that you shared with us was actually that you don't need to own the fans. You need to give them access to their favorite team, which we hope is, of course, Toronto Defiant. And it turns out it is, because now they want to be associated with their team. And so how do we do that? And that's the evolution. That was a successful approach. And the evolution has been, how do you bring them in? How do you give them exclusive things? How do you give them access to the team? Made slightly harder because we can't do it in person, but we do Discord watch parties and things where the community comes together. We have invited and brought on board many influencers in the community, whom are content creators, influencers, a guy by the name of CarQ, a woman by the name of Fran. These are amazing influencers that become part of that community and help tell our story for us, in addition to our fans and our content team producing content. And so I would say the evolution has been progressive and positive, and I can't wait until we can actually bring people together with our players in an event environment and actually give them opportunity to be more engaged. It's going to be amazing. So I thank you for that advice, because it has been very helpful.
The football supporter culture is just about this collaborative community, right? And that supporter is part of the conversation as you're curating different things, and they're a great group to bounce ideas off of. And they've certainly got their strong opinions, but that openness we've found has, since day one at TFC, has been very important. So yeah, no, I was happy when you called, because it's, again, a fascinating world. Mm-hmm. So when Overactive Media launched, my understanding was, Overwatch League, Toronto Defiant, and then 2.5 years later, a few years later, this explosion of a global esports company, where you've got Overwatch League with Toronto Defiant, Call of Duty, Toronto Ultra. You've got the Mad Lions playing out of Spain. So you're truly global from a footprint standpoint now. And then last week, the big stadium announcement, our neighbors on exhibition grounds. Short period of time with massive expansion. I just love to hear. I mean, your boardroom must be exciting. There's never a shortage of ideas and whatnot. So give us some insight into how that has grown over the last number of years, and maybe how some of that played out.
Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right. Interestingly, you and I talked about this before the call. This company actually started in the blockchain space. The co-founders started to look at starting a company in that space. And while they were on their roadshow trying to figure out what they wanted to be, there was a lot of discussion about esports and this evolving business model where there is a long-term sustainable ability to be profitable. And they pivoted to esports. And that's where it all started, with an Overwatch franchise. Simultaneously, we purchased a company in the US called Splice so that we could bring some in-house expertise to the table. And as a result, I'll get into how we got into the European League of Legends with that slot. So let's start with the business model, because this to me is the most interesting part. And one of the reasons that I left a traditional, large, stable company to join a startup. The business model was so important. So gaming, as I mentioned before, has been around for a long, long time. Esports, along the way, people started to realize, wow, we can play each other and it can be competitive and there can be an outcome and somebody wins and they win a bit of prize money. And then what happened was the publishers still owned their games, but tournament organizers popped up and created an opportunity to create big tournaments, to garner some sponsorships, to, in some cases, there are registration fees, to gather the pool of money that would then pay out prize money. And then people realized, companies came along and realized, or individuals came and said, well, why don't I start a team? Let's use Call of Duty as the example. I'm going to start a team. I'm going to go and recruit players, and I'm going to pay them to be on my team. It wasn't regionally based, so the teams could be anywhere. You name your team, you brand your team, you try to sell your team to a sponsor. Again, you're in the global internet ecosystem, and we're going to go play and we're going to try and win. And the problem with that business model is your revenue stream is really dependent on prize money, which largely goes to players. And so you get a couple of points off prize money, which is very difficult to sustain a company where you're paying players, you've got staff, you've got operational costs. Even if the players are playing online, and so it's not necessarily bricks and mortar costs, there are huge costs to running a company, and the payout wasn't making sense. It's too fragmented, too many people were taking parts of the revenue pie, as it were. And so back to my point about Activision Blizzard, Activision decided we're going to invest in a league structure. We're going to literally emulate traditional sport. We're going to look at all the things that work in traditional sport. We're going to emulate that. We're going to create a closed ecosystem. There's going to be scarcity. If you are a sponsor, a Coca-Cola, an HP, and you want to be part of this league we're creating of the best, I'll keep going back to Call of Duty. It's an easy example because it's well known. We're going to create an ecosystem where if you want to be part of it, you come to us, the league, much like the Olympic world, much like the NHL, and you can sponsor our league, what we're doing. You can be very integrated into our global broadcast being whether linear or digital, both have existed along the way and will continue to exist, linear being traditional television. And we're going to franchise the ability for local groups to buy into a team, to monetize in their region, but to take advantage of revenue sharing from the league. We're successful, therefore they're successful. And that pool of return, sort of everybody gets successful and it perpetuates itself, creates a very sustainable business model for us. And of course, the growth of franchise value, because other teams, other people want in, they want to buy a team, and franchise value continues to grow. The value of the assets continue to grow. And so that's the business model we're in. We started with Overwatch. Part of our Overwatch agreement said when Call of Duty becomes a league, we will have first right in Toronto. It just so happens today there's only one Call of Duty team. Will there be expansion? Of course, over time. There are two Overwatch teams. Vancouver has an Overwatch team, part and parcel with the Vancouver Canucks. It's a group of companies that own that group. So that's how that evolved. As I said, we had purchased a company called Splice out of Rochester, who were an endemic group that knew esports, and we needed some esports knowledge back at the start. And they had what is called a slot in the European League of Legends League. League of Legends is actually the largest game by viewership in the world, and they have leagues in North America, in Europe, and in Asia. We are in the European League based in Berlin. When we did that, we realized, okay, well, we think this will regionalize, one, and two, we would need an operational base. And we then purchased a company called Mad Lions in Madrid. What's very interesting about the Spanish gaming and esports audience is they absolutely over-index. In Spain, in the US, in Latin America, Spanish audiences are very connected to players, influencers, gaming, esports. And so our business base is actually in Madrid, and we have an Academy League of Legends team that of course feeds into our LEC team, we call LEC, European League of Legends. So that model has evolved, and League of Legends is extremely successful. Then along the way, speaking to the business model, we realized that in CSGO, Counter-Strike, also, I would say one of the 4 largest games in the world, the ones I've mentioned, Overwatch, Call of Duty, League of Legends, CSGO. Fortnite certainly has had its time, but those games by viewership and by actual engagement and play are the largest games in the world by far. We could go into a long conversation about it. So CSGO is a very open ecosystem, very fragmented. There are tournaments literally on a weekly basis run by different people, and you have a team and you can play. We are trying to evolve the business model. And in this case, a group of successful organizations, esports organizations, came together. We went to the publisher and said, we want to start a league, and we want it to be the leading league in CSGO. It's not the only one. I shouldn't say that. It's the only league, but there are still CSGO tournaments that happen, which is different than the other 3. And now we, a group of 12 teams, own what is called Flashpoint, which is a CSGO league within the CSGO ecosystem. All of the games have different ecosystems, and they're all very interesting. Call of Duty, as an example, has done a very good job of diversifying their portfolio with Call of Duty Mobile, with Warzone. There are lots of different ways that they engage fans and players. And so we have multiple different business models, all based on the franchise league model that comes from traditional sport. There is no question. And so that is what has driven us. The way we think about growth is, of course, leagues and teams at the heart of what we do, no question, much like Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. We are also in the event business. We talked about this a little bit. We're in the live event business. We want to be generating revenue, engaging our fans, engaging our partners in the live event business. Today, it's the virtual event business, online event business, which has proven to be successful, but we want both. And we're in the venue business. And that's the reference you talked about. I'll get to the new venue in a minute. Right now, we have 15,000 square feet that we moved into in Liberty Village, a very cool area, as you know. Our players live in condos basically next door in Liberty Village. That is our Ultra team and our Defiant team. And we have this space that is part office, part training facility, part player areas for all of the training they need to do and all of the prep, a content studio. And our partners have come along and integrated to make this a pretty cool space that you're going to be seeing in the coming month or so. We will launch this amazing space. It's a miracle that we have actually managed to get done what we needed to get done through lockdowns and things, but we're very excited about our current space, which we will be inviting fans into, of course, when the time is right. Looking out to the future, another way we will diversify our own portfolio is to be in the venue business, the actual venue business. When we go to host events at other venues, like the Scotiabank Arena, it is very expensive. And there are no economies of scale, of course, because you're doing this in different venues and there are a lot of different costs and learnings. We want to have our own venue, and that venue will be first and foremost an entertainment venue where our esports teams will be based. And it allows us then to grow the hosting strategy for Toronto, for Canada, where we're bringing esports events. You will start to see in all different sorts of games, whether it's the World Games, the Gay Games, the Commonwealth Games, you will start to see esports integrated into all of these. I sit, as I've mentioned to you, on the Global Esports Federation, one of their committees, and it's very interesting the evolution that's happening for all of the reasons we've talked about. And so we'll be in the venue biz. And the fourth pillar, teams, events, venue, is really a larger gaming / audience business. We're in the business of attracting audiences, of connecting audiences to consumers and to brands. And that's where we will do a lot of things that are more oriented around gaming and lifestyle that grow our audience that is larger than necessarily the core esports audience. And so that's really the evolution. And so you heard about our venue announcement. We're very excited about everything we want to do in Exhibition Place. And this week we just announced our intent to go public, which doesn't have an impact specifically on our business operations, but certainly is an evolution of everything we always expected we would do, and will provide us with the investment required to grow as we'd always dreamed of growing. So it's an extraordinarily exciting and busy time, but we couldn't be happier with our progress.
That's amazing. That's a fun and exciting executive table. I can only imagine.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 5 things that you unpacked in that last discussion. So I want to hit on a couple of those. So Overwatch League. I want to provide some context to franchise value. I think everybody in traditional sports was looking at and considering potentially owning an Overwatch League or League of Legends or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of professional sports teams that do own. We own within NBA 2K. We participate in EMLS and what the NHL is doing. But at the time, this was years ago, I think the franchise fee that they were talking about was $10 million franchise fee. And for the class and the students or people that are listening to this, to put that into perspective, we bought Toronto FC's franchise in 2006 before our launch in 2007, but we bought for $10 million, the same valuation that was on the Overwatch League. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about franchise valuation and how that calculation and how that makes sense financially.
Well, I think you've already touched on it. So the franchises that we have purchased have been typically double that at least. So we're talking about even larger franchise fees, larger certainly than MLSE entrance fee. It is all about enterprise value. There's no question that the valuation that we did was about what's this going to be worth based on all the things I've already talked about, based on the audiences, based on the ability to draw assets that are valuable to partners, based on viewership. Of course, global viewership is a huge piece of this. And then I would say the last piece is the scarcity model, frankly. There is some scarcity there are organizations that want in on each of these franchises. And so you create, of course, value based on scarcity. I'll say a couple of things about this. It comes back to audience scale. And with respect to soccer as one example, the audiences that we're seeing for League of Legends or Call of Duty already exceed that of MLS. And so, and part of that is because it's a global audience. And so and the other thing is you're seeing viewership that is doubling on an annual basis. And so League of Legends it's astronomical. And we focus, of course, on the European League and the viewership there. But the viewership just continues to grow because we are collectively evolving. We're collectively evolving the fan experience, even online, not to mention in person. Each of these leagues, whether they're regional, so League of Legends actually isn't specifically regional yet. When and if it happens, we are ready with our Madrid Mad Lions branding that would be based in Madrid. Currently in Europe, the league is at a studio in Berlin. That just happens to be their location there. But there are different moments and tent poles across the way where people come together. It's a greater opportunity for fans to come together. And then the World Championships, which of course, luckily our team went to this year in China. They couldn't have fans, but in a future scenario, that League of Legends World Championships would be well oversubscribed, both in person. They would easily fill 50,000 people, which they've done before. They did an event at the former ACC years ago, the World Championships of League of Legends, and easily sold that out. And so all of this is to say that the factors that go into valuing a franchise and an organization are all there based on audience scale that already exists, which is why the model around these games is so important. With due respect to NBA 2K, which we love, and we love the Raptors Uprising, and we do things with you guys, the audiences just are much smaller. And so it makes it harder to, well, it doesn't make it harder. You just have to look at that business, given its scale and its audience and what they're doing, different than what we're doing. We plan to invest against what we believe to be the size of this audience. So I do think it starts with audience scale, and all of the assets that we look at in terms of valuing enterprise value certainly go up. The enterprise value does continue to go up. There have been some transactions in our leagues, and the price to join just, of course, continues to increase. So we got in at the right time. There's no question. And I do believe enterprise value will continue to grow. It is a big part of our conversation in the market right now. as we're out. We're actually in the beginning phases of a raise that leads into this go public. So enterprise value is key, and you have to be able to back it up. And I believe we have the stats and the facts to do that.
Another parallel between the traditional sports world and esports is athlete development, right? How you're finding your next athlete, how you're finding the next superstar. And you touched upon the academy structure that exists with the Mad Lions. I'd love to hear about how you guys are farming to find the best players. And then what does that turnover look like? How do you comprise your team? What are the player contracts? Are they year long? Are they multi-year? Again, this is a new world, so curious.
It is, and they're just such great questions. So I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. The first is that the evolution of the esports athlete, whatever you want to call the player, the athlete, the competitor, has been rapid and is fascinating. And as no surprise, the focus on diet, physical fitness, mental wellness, all of that is where we invest time and money, as we did, frankly, back at the Olympic Committee, as you do at Maple Leaf Sports. The focus on being the complete athlete and human in order to perform at your best is no different. The things we do for game day prep, it's all evolving so quickly. We have professional chefs, we have professional physical trainers, we have mental health professionals. And so just that evolution is extraordinarily important, again, so that you can perform at your best on your day. A focus on sleep, a focus on a lot of breathing exercises, stretching. What do you need to do physically for these players who, as you can imagine, have a lot of stress on their wrists and on their hands, and of course on their brain and on their eyes. And so while it's slightly different maybe than soccer or football or hockey, it is the same principles that are derived. So just in terms of, as we look at talent ID and growing the pipeline and the pool of players, it's very interesting. To date, the community, the ecosystem, the community's been, everybody sort of knows everybody, and the coaches and the team performance side know who the pool of players are, because the community is what it is. Again, it's all online. So if you think about a traditional scouting model, you're physically needing to be in a place to watch. Obviously, that has evolved in traditional sport as well. But in this case, there's nothing stopping you from having your eye on a South Korean player for Defiant if you live in Toronto, because you can literally watch online. So we really focus on path to pro, and there are different models. One is the academy model. We actually have had an academy team for our Overwatch team and endeavor to do that again, absolutely. Some of the decisions we had to make last year led us to decide, okay, well, let's put that team aside for a minute. We have our roster. In the Overwatch scenario, there are boot camps that happen preseason during the open sort of draft timeframe. And so everybody, whether they get together physically or they get together virtually, there is an opportunity to do that scouting that you're looking for, and to try and figure, okay, what's the right team and what's the right group that we want. The interesting challenge for some of these games is language, because there are different areas that evolve, just like every other sport or business. It's, the principle of comparative advantage in economics, or clustering. There are Defiant players. Often there is a huge group in Asia that are very good at playing Overwatch. There are also great North American, European players, but there are more in Asia. Our Counter-Strike is very popular in Denmark. So traditionally, Danish players end up being the best. And so we have these decisions to make around our roster. How do you create a great roster where everybody can speak the same language? And what reflects the city and your brand and what you're trying to build. And that's important too, for all the reasons we talked about, because our fans are very interested in match play, of course, and engagement with players. And so how do we represent what we stand for and build winning teams and do all the things we need to invest in our players to make sure they're ready to perform at their best? And so many similarities, certainly some nuances with traditional sport, and something that we invest heavily in and will continue to do so as we build these teams out. You asked about contracts. So that is also an evolution. It's an evolution with the league in terms of what is required. Currently, there is no PA, Players Association. Will that evolve? I suspect. Most players have agents, so that's good because you would want them to have somebody negotiating on their behalf. There are guidelines set by the league in terms of sort of minimums and timeframes. A lot of contracts are still a year. It will come as no surprise. We are trying very hard to ensure that we have more continuity. So our Ultra team is actually, the 4 starters are all returning from last year. So that is amazing for us. Our Defiant team, we decided to shift our strategy. And so it's a new team coming together, and it depends on the team and the game and where we are. But of course, we have started to do more 2-year deals, and we're trying to extend that depending on what our strategy is. So it's a real mix. It's not as established as traditional sport, but it is getting there rather quickly. And you know, what's really interesting too is the players. I think about growing up in Canada, I think about hockey or basketball, other sports where we started at a young age, we're in programs. I remember I played soccer at McGill. We would dress up to go to the stadium for our matches. That is all part of the culture and the respect and the etiquette you build. What we've done is we've taken the best players in the world and brought them together in a new city, and they haven't necessarily had all of that. And so there's a lot of establishing culture and establishing process and respect and all the things you do to create those winning teams that we're working on. So it's fascinating. It really is.
It's amazing. And you look at the global recruitment in soccer as the world's game, and where you're pulling people from anywhere and everywhere. And yeah, there's the powerhouse countries, but there's there's up and coming countries in Africa that are starting to produce unbelievable talent. So it's not dissimilar, and you've got a global footprint.
That's right.
Of global esports athletes that you're trying to bring together, you know, versus you know, a hockey or even an NBA basketball. Now NBA is growing in global scale, but hockey is, you know, there's you know 5 or 6 strong nations in hockey. So
absolutely,
it's
interesting. I referenced the event my events team led last night. Again, nothing to do with our brands or our teams, but the Houston Outlaws team, the winning content creator played soccer at his university. He's now post-university and trying to figure out, you know, what he wants to do. The overlap with sport, I always say, I mean, soccer is certainly not going anywhere. This is a sport that is the world sport. And sitting next to it is this sort of growing esports league, and they will absolutely coexist, and there will be overlap. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we could talk about esports for quite a bit longer because I've got a bunch more questions here, but I'm going to transition now to some previous roles, or actually leadership. Let's just talk about leadership. So Alyson, you, over your last number of roles, you've been at the executive table in a number of different organizations. Knowing you, very strong personality, you know, you've been selling for a long time. You do a great job around the board table, but oftentimes you might be one of the only females at the board table. And I'm just curious as to, you know, how you've dealt with and managed through those situations when you might be outnumbered from that standpoint. Did you see it as a barrier, an advantage, or what was your approach like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for asking. I wouldn't say that I saw it as a barrier. I mean, certainly we all deal with challenges through our careers, and I know you and I are similar. My goal is to contribute, have impact, of course, be successful, but be successful as a team collectively. And I haven't felt barriers to that. There's no doubt that I am often the only woman at the table, and it felt that way sometimes at Bell Media as well. And look, there was great diversity at the executive table at MLSE, but more men. It's not something that's been a barrier, but it certainly has led me to focus on, you really have to focus on results. You have to focus on being impactful, on being heard, of course. And I work with lots of young women today about posture and how to make sure that you have a strong point to make in the boardroom, because you can't be apologetic. Women love to be apologetic. We feel guilty. Don't be apologetic, state the facts, don't ask for permission, you know, be the person you can be, take up the air that you have and you can be. And so I think I've probably overcome any potential barriers through tremendous hard work. I always want to have a great understanding of context and of what's happening around me. So in that sense, I don't see it as a barrier particularly. Having said that, the reason I put so much time into WISE, Women in Sports and Events, into working with women in our industry is because I do believe that there are lots of innate reasons why women either self-select themselves out of business at senior levels or face barriers to growing. And a lot of that is within us. The most important thing, without a doubt, is having peers and champions around you that support you, that can help you learn, that you can learn from in terms of, I've got this experience. Cheri Bradish is a very good friend and a great connector, and someone that brings a group of leaders together. We meet, we've got a meeting this afternoon, and we learn from each other, and we support each other. And having that is actually just so critical and has been really helpful. The last thing I'll say is, I have worked with great organizations. I've been so fortunate, and I've worked very hard, and I've really enjoyed every experience. And I chose to leave a big organization to rejoin a boss who I believe in his vision, his approach, and what he was building, a growing industry, and my boss and Chris Overholt. And that is also important too. We have an executive team with myself, Chris, and Adam Adamu, who's one of our co-founders, and we really work well together. Our strengths complement each other's. We're open about areas of development. We're very transparent. We're very respectful. Those are all really important things that don't get overlooked, but are hard to find the right combination in both your executive team. Our senior leadership team is very strong. And look, I'll tell you right now, we have work to do on our senior leadership team to grow in terms of our diversity. Some of that was the pace at which you need to move to grow fast. But we talk about it all the time, and it's extremely important. And so all of those things, I would say, are part of certainly what my legacy will be, and what I enjoy about what I do is making sure that we focus on everybody being successful. Every voice is so important. And there is just absolutely no doubt, given my experience, that multiple different diverse voices will lead to greater success than, a single type of voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And the work you're doing with WISE Toronto specifically, if you wouldn't mind expanding on that a little bit, for the students and for the people listening. I think I understand it's an organization that's not just in Toronto, but there's a Toronto chapter, and you work closely with that group. So We'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, WISE is a chaptered organization. There's a group called WISE National in the US, and then there are chapters in different cities, and every mandate is slightly different, but the point truly is support and advancement of women in sports and events, particularly on the business side. It's not as much focused on athletes and on the field of play. And a group of us led by Laurie Capron at the NHL, started a chapter here in Toronto, absolutely to speak to the country, but we hope to see lots of chapters opening across the country. So we're quite focused on Toronto as a chapter. We did some strategic work together early on when we could be together in person. And really what we came up with in terms of our own specific mandate is that group, that level in your career where it could be senior manager, it could be director level, where there's a real inflection point. You're either going to grow into an executive, or you stop and you're not, or you move, or, piled on top of that, of course, is family planning and having children and all of those things that some people choose to do. And so that's our focus. Our focus is, how do we support, provide network, provide tools, provide learning, confidence to women to get them over that hump, to get them to executive levels. Because as you well know, the discussion around women at the boardroom table, it's all systematic. It's because not enough women become C-level women, not enough women are chiefs, and therefore if you're not a chief and not have experience, you're not going to be asked to be on a board. And so you have to build that up. You have to build women at executive levels for that diverse voice, and to get them to a place where they, frankly, not only have an opportunity, but want to be a chief executive officer or a chief of some sort, or just a senior executive. And so that's our area of focus. And it's broad in the sense that, again, we want to connect this community, but we're trying to share. Most recently, we did a webinar around mental health and well-being. Of course, in this time, we all need that discussion. We focus a lot on fiscal and financial literacy, on specifics in the workplace that help us understand how do we become leaders, and just helping. We have a mentorship program so that we can talk through some of those decisions we make along the way. That's the focus, and the feedback's been very positive. It doesn't replace any other women's groups. There are lots that are great. And I'll just leave you with the last insight, which is this is not a group by women for women. We need our male colleagues to help advance us, to bring all women to the senior leadership tables. And so we're very focused on bringing people like you to our events and to our networking sessions, because it's extremely important to have peers and leaders that are champions of women.
Some tremendously important work being done there. And we're starting to see, over the last 6 months specifically, a huge amount of work being done within organizations, speaking to our organization specifically around the ED&I space. And we're starting to see a lot of action take place, and it's not just talk, right? So the events that you're putting on and, the investments that we're all making is important, and we're going to see hopefully a different future and outlook for the industry. So that is very exciting. Transitioning to our last question, Alyson, because this has been a great hour so far. A lot of people that are going to listen to this podcast are students that are coming through, third, fourth year in their different programs, and they're going to be entering the workforce shortly. And if you had to leave them with, a few tidbits of what you look for when you're talking to either young executives or people trying to break into the industry, it's hard in our sports and entertainment industry. And there's so many people. There's thousands of people applying for some jobs in our organizations, which is crazy, right? It's super competitive. What do you look for?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing I always say to people who ask me about getting into sports, media, entertainment is work hard and be good at something. It's less about how much you know about Toronto Ultra or Toronto Maple Leafs or how much you're a fan. That's great, of course. But be good at something. In both of our organizations, I have a finance team that is so critical to our function. I have an HR team, I have an IT team. We just hired an IT assistant who happens to be a massive Call of Duty fan. But first and foremost, he knows what he's doing in the IT space, which is what we need. And now he's so excited and we're so excited. And because we're in online play, we play through the weekends. And so you need to have somebody obviously on standby all the time to make sure that players can have the right internet connections. So I would say be good at things. I remember some of the friends I made at MLSE that were in those corporate services functions, whether it was IT or finance. Be really good at partnerships. Be really good at marketing, whether you're a designer, you're a community manager, you're a brand manager. Because what we look for is best in class, people that can join us who have a great portfolio of experience, whether young or experienced, who come in and are very good at what they do. And so that's the most important thing. It's not about being good at sport. It's not about being a good fan. It's about being very good at something and figure out what that is. Figure out if you're analytical and you want to take that path, if you're a natural seller and you want to be in the partnership sales business, if you love the brand business, if you're a content creator and you want to be in that world, be very good at what you do. And so work hard. And you don't have to be in sport from the beginning. If you work hard, I really believe it will happen. There are lots of amazing sport organizations out there. And so to the students, as you're studying and as you're thinking, figure out what you want to do, because we work a lot. I know I can speak for Chris and I. We work day, we work night, we work weekends. So you need to enjoy the actual work you're doing, quite apart from what teams you're cheering for and the ecosystem you're in. And so that's my first piece. The second is really a little bit more about emotional intelligence and understanding yourself and understanding the organization, and remembering that you don't want to be going to look for a job. You want to look for the job. You want to work at a place that I will say has the same values as you, but even more importantly, where you fit, where the people that you're going to work with on a day-to-day basis, don't necessarily see things through the same light as you do, but that you're going to enjoy working with those people. And so what I look for, it really is empathy, contextual understanding of your environment. On a daily basis, we're needing things from everybody else in our org. My entire career has been about me asking for things from my colleagues. You need to find a way to get your colleagues to do what you need to get your job done. And that's a hard thing to do. And so you can't do it on your own. Luckily, I come from a team background, a big family. Everything's always been about collaboration and needing to get things done together. But that, to me, that's the fit piece. Is this person going to come in and be able to not necessarily just focus on one single thing, but on game day, help and do this, and, come together and we're doing something for a partner that may require a little bit of different thinking, be part of strategic sessions and brainstorms, and be part of a family. And so to me, those two things, the second is harder to pinpoint how you prepare for that. But I speak about this with my team all the time. We have so many great natural tensions on our teams around a designer designs something that a brand partner needs to approve, but so do we from a brand perspective. Functionally, it has to make sense for our teams, and everybody's got a strong opinion about what the outcome should be. And so that's the part of my job I love. I try to make sure that everybody's getting a little bit of what they need and that the outcome works for everybody. That's a hard thing to do. And those natural tensions exist on a daily basis in all organizations I've worked for. And so the ability to work within that environment is so important. And look, in our short time, I would tell you, we've had employees that are very focused on what they want to produce, what they want to do, what they believe is their approach. And sometimes that's not what partners want, or that's not what's good for our brand. And it just is not the right combination of what we're doing. And so those are sort of the two areas I would say: work hard, be really good at something, and understand that you're always going to need things from your peers. And so your approach needs to reflect that.
Those natural tensions within the group, that means they care.
It's great.
That means everybody's engaged. And when you lose
it.
that natural tension, then somebody doesn't care anymore, right? So as a leader, you want to have that competitive nature within the organization. As the boss and the leader, you got to manage all those different personalities. It's an art.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I loved how you described that there. This was great, Alyson. It was really a great 101 on the esports world as well. Even though we're, you said 10 years in, your company's 3 years in. Everybody's still learning and understanding and trying to unpack exactly what the esports world is all about. So we're all watching. We're watching the news and the media and seeing what you're doing, and to be able to connect and hear the successes that your company's having has been really great. So I want to thank you on behalf of Ryerson University, on behalf of Dr. Cheri Bradish, who brings a lot of people together as a connector, and certainly brings us together as well on occasions. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, and thank you for your interest. It is true. It continues to evolve, and we learn as well as we go, and we want to be leaders as we're building this industry. So hopefully that's what you're seeing. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Nice to chat.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alyson.